Hello and welcome to this session about spatial analysis across ArcGIS. This is a continuation of my presentation from the plenary to give me an opportunity to go into a little bit more detail about many of the areas of analysis that I've discussed. Now there are other sessions on notebooks, so although I'll be covering that lightly at the end, for this particular session I'm going to focus more on insights and geoprocessing in ArcGIS Pro. As before, we're going to be using traffic accident data across Surrey. The hope is that spatial analysis will enable us to make the roads safer. Let's get started with insights. And this is the workbook that I showed in the original presentation. We've got a map at the top. We can start understanding the severity of the type of instance. The next section is covering off the temporal profile, whether activities have happened throughout the month, throughout the week, or throughout the day. And then finally at the bottom, we can look at the various different conditions that might have contributed to the accident. What was the road class, what were the light conditions, and what was the weather? But for this presentation, I want to show you this in a little bit more detail. How do we get up and running from scratch? So let's start with a blank workbook. To begin, we need to add some data. So I can click the plus button and search for my accident information. So I find the Surrey traffic accidents, and what we can see here, there's a couple of data sets. We've got the boundary and the accident data, and we'll add both in. By default, when we add this data, it's going to create us a simple map that shows that symbology. And if I wish, I can expand out the map to give it a little bit more space. What I want to do now is better understand the data that's sitting behind the geography. So if I expand out the accident data, we've got access here to all the attributes that we can use for analysis. So first up, we're going to look at accident severity. Now to create a chart for this, we simply choose the accident data, drag it on, and choose a chart type. Now when we present it like this, we might feel that this is the wrong visualization, and it's very easy to change. So I go to the chart, and I choose perhaps a donut chart instead. And that's going to give me a different and better way of presenting this information. Next up, I want to look at the temporal profile of this data. And you'll notice we've got a date field here, but Insights has automatically broken it down into various chunks. So we can look at the month, the day, the hour. So let's drag those on. So I'm going to choose month, drag that on to be a column chart. Next up, I'm going to look at the day of the week. Exactly the same process, create another column chart. And finally, we look at the hour of the day. So you'll notice that by default, it's adding a line for the mean value. If I want to turn that off, I can choose the statistics and just turn that off for that chart. So I'm going to do that for all three. I'm also going to tidy up the positioning of these other elements so they all line up. Finally, I want to start looking at some of those road conditions. So if we scroll to the bottom of our attributes here, we've got information about the road class and light and weather conditions. So I'm going to drag the road class on, perhaps choose a column chart again. Probably the wrong visualization, so I can very quickly change that to a donut chart as before. Then I want to look at the light and weather conditions. Now these work quite nicely as tree maps because it really highlights the most predominant conditions but allows us to see the other factors as well. So that's light conditions. Now we can see weather conditions. So hopefully what you're seeing here is this is a really easy way to get a good understanding of what this data is telling you. I can simply select the attributes and drag them onto display. And what I typically do is I would drag on every single attribute, look at whether it's telling me anything interesting. If it is, leave it in the workbook. If it's not, just remove it and continue on. So we've now created a fairly simple workbook that gives us a good understanding of some of this data. What about if I want to make these charts and graphs interact with each other? How do I do that? If I select one of these cards, you'll notice here there's an option that enables me to enable cross filters. This is ensuring that any interaction in one element will be updated across all the other cards. So if I enable cross filters on them all, so now if I wanted to look at conditions that happened in the rain, I can select that factor within the chart, and this is when the rest of the workbook will update. So I'm fairly happy with the way this looks and feels now, so then I can just save it, and then if necessary I can share it with colleagues. So hopefully that's given you a really nice overview of how quickly we can create insight using this workbook process. By dragging on the various different attributes, we can better understand the data, not just the geography, but the temporal aspect and the statistics behind it. So Insights is definitely a really good place to start if you're new. If you're more confident in the use of ArcGIS and would like access to a wider array of analytical tools, then ArcGIS Pro is definitely the place for you. And in this demo, I'm going to run you through the analytics I showed previously, but again, let's start from scratch so I can show you the individual processes. So we've got the accidents data, we've got the road information, I've got this Surrey grid that allows us to create a thematic map. So to start with, we want to look at just the more serious accidents. So I can start by doing a select by attributes. So I'm going to select from the accident data, I'm going to do a new selection, and I'm going to create an expression. So I want to look where accident severity is equal to either serious, or we're going to look at where the accident severity is fatal. So I can click OK, and you'll now see that it's selected all those attributes in the map. Next up, I want to do a spatial join that joins that to the grid data so we can create that thematic map. Now I could find this under the analytical toolbar here, but I personally prefer to use the geoprocessing pane because it's very easy to search and find for tools. So if I look for join, it's giving me a variety of options, and I can see down here at the bottom we've got spatial join. So I'm going to open that up. The target features are going to be the grid, the join features will be the accidents. Now because I've got a selection set in my data, it's only going to use the selection, it's not going to use the complete data set. I give it an output name, I'm going to do a one-to-one join, I'm going to keep all the target features, and I don't need to have any sort of search radius because we're just looking at which points fall within each boundary. So when I run that, it's going to go away, do that spatial join, and when it's finished, it will add that back into the map. Now at the moment, it doesn't look that dissimilar to what we had before, but by going into the symbology, we can change the way it's displayed to reflect that join count. So I'm going to do graduated colors based on the join count. I can choose a color scheme that works for me, so I'm going to choose the orangey scheme. And we've now got a thematic map that shows the distribution of accidents across Surrey. So very quick, very easy. Next up, I want to run exactly that same process, but instead of joining to the grid, we're going to join to the road data. So I go back to my geoprocessing, and I'm going to, rather than joining to the grid, we'll join to the roads. We'll give it a slightly different name. And this time I do want to have a search radius because everything might not snap exactly onto the road network, so I'm just going to have a 20-meter buffer around that. And I'm going to run that process again. And that's now added the roads, and then I need to go into the symbology again. We're going to do graduated colors, based on the join count. Now, at the moment, these lines aren't very visible, so I'm going to slightly change the thickness of that by showing I want to update the symbology for all of them. So if I just maybe make that 3. And finally, this is just looking at the raw join count. I want to normalize this based on the length of the road. So I've got the shape length here. So now the symbology is picking out where we've got a large number of accidents over a very small geography. Finally, I want to look at the clusters of accidents that have happened at very specific junctions. Now for that, I'm going to use the 80-20 tool. So if I search for 80-20, I've got the 80-20 analysis here. And what this is doing is looking for locations where there's a very large number of incidents that are happening in a very small geography. So it's ideal for picking out junctions that might be of particular concern. So I'm going to reference the accident data, generate a new output feature class, and my cluster tolerance is I'm looking for accidents that have happened within 100 meters of each other. And the output field doesn't really matter, but I'll just choose the police force for now. And we'll run that. So when this gets added to the map, it's actually going to show every single junction. So we'll then need to filter it down into just the areas where we're concerned. While it's doing that, I'm just going to turn off the road network. Okay, so it's showing all the different junctions, all the different accidents, and we can see that we've got various different clusters varying from 1 up to 4. I'm really only interested in the areas where we're seeing a slightly larger number, so I can double click this layer, go into the definition query and change it so we're only seeing where the accident count is either 3 or 4. Let's change it to is greater than 2. So now that's just highlighting the junctions that are of most concern, and I might want to change the symbology to reflect the rest of my color scheme. Okay, so just a quick recap of what we've done there. So we've created a thematic map by joining the serious accidents to the grid. We've created a view of which roads are most dangerous by doing a spatial join between accidents and the roads. We've then used the 80-20 tool to pick out which junctions are seeing a significant number of accidents that perhaps need to be reviewed. Now, if I go over to my history tab here, it will then show the 4 tasks that I've run over the course of this demo. And if I double click any of these, it's going to open up that same tool with all the same parameters, so I can rerun it in case I want to tweak any of these parameters or perhaps run it at a later date. The other thing I can do is I can take these tools and create my own model. So if I go back to my catalog pane, go to my toolboxes here, and I'm going to create a new model. I can go to the history tab. I'm going to select all 4 of those tasks, and I just simply drag them onto my new model. And if I also lay out fit to display, we can now see the various tasks we run in this analysis. Now I want to run this in a certain order. So what I can use preconditions to say, okay, I don't want anything to run until I've done the select layer by attribute. So to do that, I take the accident output, I drag that onto my spatial join and say, okay, that's a precondition. So I'm now saying I want to do the select layer by attribute before doing spatial join. Then I can do the same from one spatial join to the next to say that that's a precondition, and then from the spatial join to the 80-20 to say that's a precondition. Now if we also lay out and fit to window, we can see the workflow. So we're selecting by layer by attribute, we're doing a spatial join, Then we're doing another spatial join against the roads, and then finally we're doing the 80-20 analysis. So I can save my tool and I could easily rerun this again now if I so wished, but the user wouldn't be given any input. They wouldn't be allowed to choose the accident data, they wouldn't be able to choose the output locations. To enable that, I need to right click this and make these parameters. So a parameter means that at runtime, the user will get to decide, okay, well, what accident data do I want to use? What boundary data set do I want to reference? So I'm going to make all of these parameters. I'm also going to make the outputs parameters because the end user might want to decide where they want to save it. I can now save that, go back to my catalog, and I've now got a model that's ready to run that will recreate the entire process for me in one go. The final thing I might want to do is go into the properties of this model and perhaps give it a better name. Okay, so from scratch, I've shown you how we can recreate this analysis, how we can rerun processes from the history tab, and how we can very easily make our own tool so that if I was to go here, remove all these data sets, I can then double click my accident analysis and it's now allowing me to rerun the complete process whenever I so wish. So hopefully you found that useful. I personally think that geoprocessing in Pro is incredibly powerful, and when you start creating your own tools using Model Builder and the toolbox, it makes it so much easier to rerun tasks, saving time in the future. In this final section, I'd like to show you how you can run a very similar analytical process, but using ArcGIS notebooks. So here I am in the notebook environment, and I'm going to create a new notebook by choosing from the top here. Now there's various different types I can choose, but for now the standard will be absolutely fine for what we're trying to achieve. Now that the notebook has finished loading, you'll notice that it's already referenced the GIS libraries and referenced our account already for us. If you want to run these cells just to validate the code is correct, you can click the run button. You notice you get a little star here that means it's processing, and when you get a number, that means it's complete. Now it's giving us a warning here that I'm logged in as an administrator, so I need to be very careful about the activities that I undertake because I don't want to affect my data. Now I've logged in, I need to start referencing the data sets. So I'm going to reference the accident data, the road data, and the grid data, because this is what we need for this analysis. Then I can go up to the analysis box here, and I can choose from a variety of tools that are readily available for us. So we want to do join features, so I'm going to add that in a couple of times because we want to run it once for the grid and once for the roads. Now you'll notice when it adds this in, it's not actually adding any of the parameters for me. So I need to add those, what features do I want to join, what are the tolerances, etc. So for this first one, we want to reference the grid data and the accident data. I want the spatial relationship to be intersects. I'm joining one-to-one, not worried about summary fields, and I want to output it as a new data set called Surrey accident counts. For the second spatial join, very similar approach, but rather than referencing the grid data, this time we're referencing the road data. And because we're referencing roads, I do want to have a spatial relationship here. I want to define a distance so that if those accidents are just off the road network, they'll still be picked out. And then again, I can give it a new name for the output dataset. Now I'm not going to run these now, but if I was to do so, it would then churn away in the background and generate me two new feature datasets that I can then add to my map. So if I go over to a map here, I can then add that, browse for layers, and I can look for the data sets we created as part of this analysis. And it's very easy then to add those into the display. So Notebooks is providing us a really nice scripting environment to run analytical tools to generate the results that we're looking for. So this is ideal if you've got slightly more scripting experience, or you've got a developer background, or it might be you're just a GIS analyst who's much more comfortable in the scripting environment. Notebooks is very powerful and easy to use. I hope you found this overview of spatial analysis across ArcGIS useful, and that it's given you the confidence to find the right tools for you, regardless of your background. But as a quick recap, I think Insights is a great place to start if you're new to GIS, because it provides some simple tools that really allow you to dig into the data to draw out the patterns that perhaps might have otherwise been hidden. ArcGIS Pro is providing a fantastic and comprehensive analytical framework for detailed analysis, and when combined with Model Builder, allows you to create your own tools that can save time and make you more efficient. And finally, if you're much more comfortable in the scripting environment, then Notebooks, again, is just as powerful. It allows you to build your own scripts using Python to automate your tasks, whether that be in Pro, Online, or Enterprise. So thanks again, and hope you enjoy the rest of the box set.